because as a company, especially, in an early stage company, you want revenue, you want to say yes to everything. You don't want to let things kind of slip through, but you have to. If you don't stick to what your main focus and main business unit is, you will not do that well and you will fail. So, in terms of Mynter, there's certain pieces of technology that we built that other people are like, oh, can you build this? And we're like, no, because we need to focus our attention here, right? If we had said yes, we wouldn't have done the main thing well. I think that something that is a little underappreciated is that attention units are really our most precious commodity. So we have to spend them very wisely. There's only so many things that you can do and that you can focus on. And by trying to put too many things into that is a recipe for disaster. So you have to kind of treat your time as if it's a currency, which is why I like to refer to it as attention units, and be very mindful of how you use them.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples. Not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz. Real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Many people listening to my voice right now may be going through this very conundrum: job switching or even career switching. Hey, there may be darkness on the edge of town for the economy. I can't see the future. I don't know. But we know this right now. Marketing talent is still far too scarce, which means you, dear marketer, are a precious commodity. So if you do have many options to choose from, how do you decide? Our next guest says, look at the leader you'll be working with. He words the lesson he learned from a mentor this way: the best opportunity with the wrong leader is a painful uphill journey, but with the right leader or partner, a tough task is achievable. We'll hear the story behind that lesson from our latest guest, along with many other lesson-filled stories. Joining me now is Frank Weil, the CEO of Myntr. Thanks for being here, Frank.
Thank you for having me. And that sounded like a very profound statement that you just read. I loved hearing that.
I can't wait to hear the story behind that profound statement from you. So let's start by looking at Frank's background real quick so you know who you're talking to. You majored in finance at the University of Florida, my alma mater. We even graduated the same year. Special place in my heart there. He was director of marketing and director of marketing and e-commerce at Havaianas, which I'm wearing some right now in his honor. Adjunct instructor at NYU, where he taught digital analytics, a required course for the digital marketing certificate. And recently, I don't know if everyone was listening, we had the academic director of NYU's integrated marketing program on an earlier episode. You could probably learn a lot from that one. But now, Frank, you're the CEO of Myntr. You manage 10 people, you manage 2 agencies, and you yourself are a vendor agency to brands like the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest and to Advertising Week. So give us an idea. What is your day like as a CEO of Myntr?
First off, are we going to spend any time talking about the Harvard of the South, University of Florida? I love that we both went there. So go Gators. I have to start off by saying that.
Absolutely.
So for Mynter and, kind of being the CEO of a startup, really you do everything from raising money to sales calls to getting the team everything they need to hiring the team to, taking out the trash. Whatever's needed is what we do.
Perfect. I should mention Frank is wearing a Gator shirt. I'm wearing the Havaianas to channel him. He's wearing the Gator shirt to maybe channel both of us. Let's jump into it. We always start on this podcast with the things you made. We as marketers, we have that special thing. I've never been a podiatrist or an actuary or something else, but I feel like we get to make things and not many others do. We make campaigns, we make brands. So let's see what you learned from the things you made. So your first lesson is find great mentors for all aspects of your life. And you learned that from Elaine Sugimura, who is the CEO of Havaianas. So tell us the story behind that, Frank.
So Elaine has such a special place in my heart. She's a dear friend and mentor. And, she taught me at a really young age. I was probably, maybe 25 at the time, that, find good mentors and life becomes much easier. Whether it's on the personal side, whether it's the professional side, whether, you're lucky enough to find someone that kind of can transcend both, which is what Elaine is for me. Elaine, is someone who taught me so much about business and, just dealing with people. But also, I remember I had a really serious girlfriend at the time, and I had introduced her to Elaine. And, the next morning, I go into Elaine's office and I said, "What'd you think of her?" We're going to leave names out of this for the sake of this podcast. And, Elaine looked at me right in the eyes and said, "She's not for you." And that like stung so much that that the person who I wanted her to really like her, didn't. And Elaine was right. And, a week later we broke up and she wasn't right for me. Right. So, finding someone who really has your best interests at heart and is willing to teach you is invaluable.
Now that you're more experienced in your career, and I'm sure you mentor people, I mean, how do you use the lessons you learned from Elaine? Because one thing actually in that story that struck me, which I don't know what the right line is especially these days, that's so helpful and profound to work with someone so close that you can trust them at that level. But then also, we have this weird work-life balance with the people we work with. I'm sure especially at a startup. So where do you now as a CEO know, where should I mentor people and where should I maybe pull some punches? Maybe it's their personal life and maybe not get too much in. How do you find that right balance?
And I love mentoring people and, helping people start businesses and grow businesses. And I think that the most important aspect of being a mentor is just genuinely looking out for them and caring about them in all aspects, right? Like a lot of times in marketing, we think we're, saving the world, but we're not, right? We're marketing a product or service. And at the end of the day, there's probably things that are more important in life than that. So I try to really help people keep things in perspective about what's important, when should it be important, prioritizing family and downtime are really, really important. We're even thinking about a 4-day work week to really help with that work-life balance. So I think that, mentorship is all about genuinely trying to help the person that you're mentoring.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. I'm glad you mentioned that. In an industry like ours, where we're not a throughput industry, you know what I mean? We're not manufacturers on an assembly line. We're not trying to get our team to just get, 100 cogs out a day. The product that we sell is essentially our ideas. So making sure you are looking after that whole person, because I'm sure, even if, I think it's great you're saying looking out for other people. Even if you're listening to this call, you're like, I don't really care about anyone else. I'm just super selfish and could care less. It would even help you out then, because if the people that are working for your team or you're working with, if they're in a good place in their life with everything that's going on, they're going to have better ideas. They're going to produce more for you ultimately than if you just try to squeeze as much as you can out of them. So I love that. Some great advice, Frank. So let's talk about your next
and I'm also very happy to announce that Elaine actually just joined our advisory board. So I still get her mentorship, 20 years later, which is really special.
That's a great long-term relationship with someone too, to keep, we always talk about networking. We've got LinkedIn, which is this kind of pseudo networking, but that's a real human network to stay connected with someone for that length of time. So that's perfect. So next lesson you talk about is do not resist change. So how did you learn that lesson? I know I hear people say this all the time. How'd you really live that, Frank?
And listen, as human beings, we're wired to resist change, right? This is easy. Let's go forward with it, right? Not the whole population didn't go buy an iPhone, with the iPhone 1, right? It took people time to kind of adapt. So I think that to not be resistant to change is a really, really hard thing. And I remember when I was running an e-commerce platform, we had our own platform. And at the time we started to really hear a lot about this platform called Magento. And, we had an opportunity to either really embrace it, lean in and understand about Magento and learn it and be a part of that ecosystem, or kind of ignore it and just go full steam ahead with our platform. And, we decided to lean into it and really learn it and add it to our toolkit where we still had our own platform, but we kind of embraced the change that was coming in the industry and became one of Magento's bigger implementers. So it was, if we had resisted seeing that, we would have missed a big opportunity and a lot of clients.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. Business books are littered with companies that will not cannibalize their own products when something better comes along. And so you're looking at that. You're with your team. You're in the early days of e-commerce. Like, where did you get the sense, or did you have to convince anyone to say, like, hey, we invested so much in this product, but we got to go with what's better for our customers? Like, was there any like challenge there with your team, or how did you dive into that?
It was, why do we need this? We have our own platform, and our own platform is great. And then we had to say that, yeah, but our platform might not be for everyone, and there might be clients of a certain size or industry that Magento is perfect for. So we don't want to lose out on those. So let's embrace it. Let's learn. Let's see what we can learn from the Magento platform that we might need to adopt. And that's kind of the way we went about it.
That's great. I think that not for everyone is so key. I know we're going to get into this a little later, but when we talk about a really powerful value proposition, a value proposition is powerful to an ideal customer, right? It's not powerful to everyone, right? Like, we're joking, like right behind Frank's head right now, there's a picture of the dunk. And anyone who's a Knicks fan knows very well what the dunk is. It's John Starks in this beautiful moment, dunking over two balls. I think one of them is Jordan, maybe Horace Grant too. And so to me and to a guy like Frank, we're the ideal customer for that picture, and we're like right on. But I've got a friend, a guy I grew up with, who's a huge Bulls fan, gave me many, many hard times over all the playoffs we lost. He would see that, and that would not appeal to him. And so it's so obvious with something like, sports, but with all of our products is getting that really human understanding of our products' flaws and vulnerabilities, and knowing who can it best serve. And for the people it can't best serve, either, help direct them to the right place, or like Frank did, maybe sometimes cannibalize that own product and team up with that other product to still serve your customers.
Yeah, and it is Horace Grant, correct. Just like with any marketing, it's really not a one-size-fits-all model. Not everything is right for everyone. So it's really understanding who you're speaking to and what's best for them. That's what makes good marketing.
So let's talk about one of your other lessons, always be a student. So we were talking about, you were there in the early days of e-commerce. Now you're there in the early days of NFT, which stands for non-fungible token. So tell us, how do you apply that lesson to always be a student? And also just tell us, for anyone at this point who doesn't know, just maybe the quick 30-second, minute, cheap definition of what the heck is a non-fungible token.
I love that you also said non-fungible token, because I haven't even said that in so long. And I really don't like when industries try to mystify things. And so an NFT is very simply a digital asset that you can prove you own, and you can sell, and you can transfer. And that digital asset could be any form of digital media. Could be an image, could be a video, could be an audio file, could be a newsletter, whatever digital media you want. So NFTs aren't super complicated. I think the industry has made it a little more complicated, and it gets lumped in with cryptocurrency and everything else. But an NFT is simply a digital asset that you can prove you own. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Absolutely. And it can't be changed, right? That's what non-fungible means.
Correct.
It can't be changed.
Correct. It's unique. And there's a lot of parallels in the NFT space now to e-commerce back in the early 2000s of, I don't know it, I need to learn it, there's so many acronyms, this is confusing, I don't understand this technology. So there's a lot of that right now in the NFT space, and even like the adoption of kind of e-commerce websites in the late 90s, like 99, to where the crypto adoption rate now is almost like an identical chart, which is very interesting. And so, as we learned and taught people e-commerce back in the day, NFTs are new. So, I was very fortunate to meet what I call the kids. They hate when I call them the kids, but they're, 22 years old, so they could be my kids. And they're these Web3 enthusiasts that are so passionate about NFTs. And, I learned so much from them and was so open to learning so much from them, even though they were half my age. Right? Like, I didn't go into the conversation saying, okay, let me hear a little bit, but let me teach you guys something. It was, please teach me more about this. I'm a huge believer that you'll learn the most from people that are actively doing something and doing it passionately than you will from reading a book about it or Googling it or anything else. So when you can find people that are passionate about the subject matter you want to learn, take that time and invest in those conversations, because it will really pay off.
Yeah, I get to speak at the university sometimes here and just working here. Something I've noticed is something that's flipped itself on its head from when I started in my career is youth can have advantages it didn't have back then. And what I mean is this, when I started, e-commerce was out and stuff, but I mean, I was writing print ads for the Wall Street Journal. That was a big excitement. I was doing, big direct mail pieces and stuff. And I didn't even get into digital stuff probably until 5 years or more into my career. So when I came in, it was very hierarchical. Like, you were young, you don't know the things as much, and the people older than you have been doing that same thing. They've been writing print ads in the newspaper for this many years, and they know it better. But coming out now, I always tell students they've got this big leg up being younger because they are, as we say, digital natives, not digital tourists or whatever, like they came up using social media. And then it's always changing too, right? I told them that back then when, Facebook was new or Twitter was new. Well, now it's the next new thing. It's TikTok, or it's, like you said, using NFTs or crypto or something like this. So I think as leaders, we kind of have to do a bit of that shift in our head too, of saying, not take that hierarchical approach and say, we've got this experience, we know everything, but say, what can we learn from these people who will know these things? We got to admit, they will know certain things better than we ever will. It's like when you're a native speaker of a language, you can learn a new language, but you're never going to know it as well as that native speaker. So that kind of interested me. Like, you go up, you see these young guys, how do you vet them out? I'm sure, like, with your experience you can use, I'm sure you've met many other kids or young people, whatever, who were trying to sell you on something where you're like, nah, I'm not. You don't really know what you're talking about. What were some of the things where you vetted them out and said, hey, this is a new industry, it's NFT. These folks, they know their stuff. Like, from my experience, I can tell these are some people I need to listen to.
So, I think that, anytime I even look to add to the team or hire people, I really don't care much about experience or where they went to school or anything like that. So much is based on, that feeling, that what's their personality profile? Are they going to be easy to work with? Are they going to be a problem? Are they, do they know what they're talking about? Can you tell, like, they're kind of making stuff up as they go? And when I met, the kids, they were just so passionate, spoke so intelligently, were so gracious with their time of educating me, and you talk about, like, all the different platforms that, okay, it's Instagram, now TikTok. I remember when we formed the business and I set up a Slack channel, they're like, no, we're not using Slack. Like, you have to use Discord. I'm like, what? Another thing? Like, what are you talking? So, like, it's just that, push pull with them. That's great. And they have got me comfortable with things that I wasn't comfortable with. And, I think that the personality profile of someone is probably the most important thing you can look for when you're going to partner with people.
That's great. And I'm also worried about kind of the personality profile within yourself. And when I hear always be a student, I think of, we recently launched a free digital marketing course. And before we launched, I was having a strategy discussion with our founder, Flint McLaughlin. I was telling him, like, marketing professionals, we don't want to be students. We don't want to be students. We want to just find problems, solve problems, do these things. And then our SEO agency came back. They did some, data into search, and they found out I was way off. I was way wrong. It's a big desire to be a student still, which I think is great. And here's one thing I've noticed when, from our own experience distributing this course, it's a chance for people to make a shift in their minds, right? Like, I just got back from vacation. It's great. I had this mental shift for a week. I just kind of could let my, brain go to a different place and think about waves and beach and sand and things that I'm not normally thinking. And I see even a high-level executive, when they're taking a course, in that moment, they're not an executive as much. If they let themselves go into it, they make a mental shift to become a student. So for you, as when you mentioned, this is your second time moving into a new, very emerging field within yourself, especially this one being later in your career. What do you do to make that mental shift to open your mind so you can learn?
Honestly, for this time, I didn't overthink it. It just felt right, and I leaned into it. I think, having a little bit of success always helps, provide some security, and that, okay, I've done this before, I can do it again. Believe in trusting my gut. It has served me well over the years, and I just didn't fight it. It was like, oh, like, this feels like an industry I want to learn about and get involved in, and I just went full steam ahead.
That's great. So trusting your gut, I mean, there's downsides. We talk a lot about A/B testing and data and some of these things, but I think trusting your gut, really, that's the upside of experience, right? It's pattern recognition. When you notice, A happens and B happens and C happens, you notice that 3, 4, 5 times, and you see it come up again, A and B, you're like, I think C is going to happen. So definitely don't overlook your gut.
I think it's also, as you get a little older, at least for me, my ego got a little smaller, and I'm less afraid to fail at something or not be perfect at something. So starting a new business in a new industry, I wasn't worried about the downside. I just went into it thinking about the upside. Whereas, if I was very early in my career, I might be, scared to make that mistake, or what will people think of me my whole career if this didn't work? So I think that's something that's important as well.
That's something I've learned in my career too. Something where some changes would happen and I have a tough time with them, or I kind of try to think through, well, why am I having a tough time with this or whatever? And I realized it was my ego. It was my ego getting in the way. I actually did a interview a few episodes ago, and one of the marketers was talking about getting a project manager on her team, and she didn't like it, and she didn't want it, and I didn't understand, because I'm like, well, I'm a creative marketer too. I love getting a project manager because I could take some of the mental weight off and not have to think about deadlines and managing teams and all these things. It's like, why wouldn't you want a project manager? And she admitted, she's like, honestly, it was an ego thing. I realized after, she's like, it was an ego thing. She's like, now that I've had that positive experience with the project manager, I realized I don't need to do everything. I need to focus on what I do best, and then I need to surround myself with other people that do some things better than me. And that's fine. I can let go of my ego and say, that's fine. That's a better place to be.
I actually think that is a much better place to be. And there was, someone who I work with named Lisa, who was the chief people officer at a company I was at. And we all took this thing called Strengths Finder. And it wasn't meant to say, okay, you're good at this, you're not great at this, let's get you better at the thing you're not good at. It was actually to figure out what you're really good at and to take all the other stuff off your plate so you can just focus on what you're naturally gifted at, because you'll do that better than anybody else will. And there are other people who will do the thing that you're not good at much better than you will ever do it. So, it used to be in performance reviews, okay, you're good at this, you're not good at this, let's get you better. But I really like the mind shift of letting people do what they do best and just go really hard on those things.
Yeah, I always tell people I manage, I feel like any position in a company is like a Venn diagram, right? In one circle we have, here's the things you're good and passionate about. And the other circle we have, here's the things that the company needs to do, essentially to stay in business, make money, whatever. And they're never going to overlap 100%, but they also shouldn't overlap 0%. So how can we manage the entire team to find each person's strengths and weaknesses and get these two things to overlap as much as possible, so the things you're doing in your role are the things you're passionate about and good at, and the things you're improving are only the things that, like you said, you absolutely have to. I am never going to be a good designer. I'm a word guy. I'm a visual guy. I am never going to be a good designer. I'm always, I could take all the courses you want. I could learn Adobe Photoshop. So I've learned I need to partner in my career, in my life, with people who are better visually than me. And so I think everyone listening kind of like, the Strengths Finder idea, thinking through, or if you can take a test like that, where are you strong? What are your gaps? What do you absolutely have to fill on your own? Like for a startup guy like you, Frank, there's probably things like to bring people on. We can't yet. I need to find a way to get through this on my own. And where can you bring in or team with or find the right agencies, vendors, people on your team to kind of, handle those parts of it. So as a whole, you collaborate and create a great overall final experience, product, whatever it is.
Yeah. And I think that when you're, a company is in its infancy, you kind of have a team of generalists where everyone's kind of doing everything. But as a company grows in maturity, you then become a team of experts, right? So I think that it's, at what point do you get to make those transitions?
Absolutely. And it's perfect because now the next part of our podcast, we talk about people you collaborated with, since we're talking about collaboration. So let's talk about the people you collaborated with, lessons you learned. The great thing about marketing, we get to make things, but we get to make things with people. Like we said, the people we collaborate with are so key because we can't often do everything, or at least we're not good at everything. So the first person you mentioned was Dwight Tom. He was the co-founder of Sea Luxury. And this is kind of, I mentioned to open up the podcast. I set it up real good, Frank, so you got to deliver here with a really good story, okay?
No pressure.
You said the best opportunity with the wrong leader is a painful uphill journey, but with the right leader or partner, a tough task is achievable. So take us back, I think it was the mid-2000s. You had a lot of career opportunities. How'd you learn this lesson from Dwight?
So Dwight was one of the original Staples people, was Bain Consulting, like this just like powerhouse of a business person that I had met through another friend who had a business that Dwight was working with, and he set us up. And Dwight was always such a great mentor, and we would talk business strategies and everything else. And then I got to kind of this crossroads of, do I go left, do I go right, or do I go straight in terms of my career and in terms of what I want my next opportunity to be. And, I'm trying to come at this like a mature business person. And I have this whole list of like, okay, here's the role, here's the title, here's the compensation, here's the day-to-day, all these different things that I thought were important at the time. And he's looking at this and he's kind of nodding his head. And I remember this is on like in New York City, I think Cafe Metro on 45th Street between Madison and 5th. I remember like it was yesterday, even though it was not yesterday. And he looked at me and he goes, okay. And he basically like took the piece of paper and crumpled it up. And he goes, you're not telling me the most important thing. I was like, no, I put salaries on here. Like I told you the most important thing. and he kind of looked at me and, smacked me upside the head. And he's like, tell me about who you're going to report to. I was like, okay, like that makes sense. I can't believe I didn't really think about that. And then we went into it and he looked at me and he goes, with zero hesitation, who can you work best with? And I answered and he goes, that's the opportunity you should take. And that stuck with me forever. Him saying that the best opportunity with the wrong leader will be a horrible opportunity. And a tough situation with a great leader is not so bad. And I kind of paraphrased just there. You read it earlier, but that has always stuck with me with who we choose to work with, who we want to bring onto the team, who I want to work for, whatever it might be. That was just so profound to me. Because I thought it was money. I'm like, what do you mean? This one had the most money. That was not the best one. And then he ups.
Yeah, I think and frankly, the reason we choose to use money as a gig so often is it's very easy. The things that are sometimes easy to measure, the things we focus on, we could see 175 is more than 150. That's easy. To your point, Frank, those kind of soft skill things of like, well, we're going to spend a huge part of our life with these people. And what do we think of these people and how are we going to, work with them? So I wonder on the flip side, you're hiring. As you mentioned some of the things you look at when you're hiring. So, and now it's, a competitive hiring environment too. So what do you do to kind of set that up to people you're interviewing with? Is there anything special you do to kind of give them a sense for who you are or who the team is as part of what, you would be offering them if you hired them? Obviously there's a compensation package. Here's your salary, here's your health insurance. I know it was one thing for me when I started interviewing. One of the great things of having a skill as a marketer, when you use it well, is you can just apply it to everything in life. And so, when I got to recruiting at universities to get people to hire for us or to interviewing too, I didn't as much take the HR mindset other than, of course, here are the things you have to do. It's kind of the marketing mindset of, we're a potential product and you are a potential customer. And likewise, you are a potential product and we're a potential customer. So on our side too, sometimes you kind of get hard in the interview to really learn about something, push them on mistakes they made, whatever it is, but also trying to set up here as honestly as we can. Here's the value proposition for us, and here's the people it works for. Here's the people it doesn't. So I just wonder on your side, what do you do to kind of say, here's that value proposition of working with this leader or what have you?
So I when it comes to hiring, I let the experts in the field, go through, can this person do the job? Do they understand what's necessary? And then when I speak with candidates, it's really them interviewing me. Like I have very few questions for them. I'm always curious what they ask me, but go into it saying like, this has to be a two-way street. You have to be as excited about coming to work for us as we are about you joining us. So what do you want to know about the company? What do you want to know about me? What do you want to know about the background? And we just talk as human beings, right? Because I think that the best way to get people to feel comfortable is when you talk on that humanistic level. And that's what's so important. So like, so many people that I've hired, they're just conversations of them asking me questions, right? Like, because I want to know, what do they want to know, right? That's the questions they ask are very telling. But more so, they need to go into it with eyes wide open, because if they join a company and it's not what they thought, it costs us all more money because they're going to leave. We're going to have to replace them. And that's more headache because we took some time training them and everything else. So it's really got to work both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I guess you need to hire someone curious, especially in an emerging field like that. How curious are they? Or do they not have any questions for you?
Sure.
All right. You say you worked with Jeffrey Fina. the VP of Michael C. Fina. You learned from him, it is okay to say no. Not only did Frank say it is okay to say no, it is okay to say no, exclamation point. It is okay to say no. So take us to a time, what was a difficult time when you had to say no? None of us like saying no.
So it was always so hard for me because by nature, I want to please people. I want to have good relationships. I'm an empathetic person. So I never like saying no. I just want to figure out, all right, how do we get to yes? But and I was talking to Jeffy, who's a brilliant business person and good friend of mine. And I was going over a situation with him and he looked at me, he's like, just say no. I'm like, what do you mean just say no? Like, you can't just say no to people. He's like, no, you can and you should. I'm like, wait, let's talk more about this. So, he kind of educated me on it a bit. And I remember we were in the final stages of winning a really, really big client that was a public company. And every day I'm like, cool, we're there, we got it. And then they kept coming back and asking for more and asking for more. And I finally got to the point, I was like, no. I said, no, we're done. This is what we can do. And they came back and signed a couple days later. And that kind of was really eye-opening for me of, oh, wow, like sometimes in negotiations, people need to hear no so they know to stop asking, right? But there's multiple different facets in which to say no, right? There's in the sake of a negotiation. Then there's in the client service world where clients keep asking for more and more and want you to do certain things. And in that respect, I realized that it's also okay to say no. You just need to be solutions oriented and explain why you're saying no. Like, we're not good at this. You don't really need this. This will cost you money you don't need to spend. But come up with a solution. So if you can say no, give a reason why, but come up with a solution that you feel in your heart is the best thing for them, it'll be a positive experience all the way around, and you won't put your company in trouble by doing things that you shouldn't be doing. And then that kind of goes to really the third component of, running a business or being a marketer and running campaigns. And, if you're a marketer, you're getting a million calls a day from every platform and everything under the sun saying, you guys should use me, you guys should use me. So, I think that by understanding value-based prioritization and what are the most important things that I need to say yes to, everything else I have to say no to, or we're going to fail as a business because we're doing too much and not staying focused on the most important things. I think that's a critical component as well.
Yeah, one question I ask myself, I learned this from, I mentioned before, Flint McLaughlin, he's our CEO and founder, and is this the highest and best use of my time? And because you, Frank, I think like most people, we want to say yes, we want to be doing everything, get involved with everything. But then when you kind of break it down and ask, is this the highest and best use of my time? You get to the point of like, well, you can't do everything. Where are you going to focus?
For sure.
But let me ask you this. So we kind of touched on this earlier. And in the very first episode of the How I Made It Marketing podcast, I talked to Whitney Hill, the head of business development at Snap ADU. She told us her go-to-market story and how it revolved around saying no. So essentially, they were a construction company, and they said no to all sorts of other work so they could only build accessory dwelling units. And they were really successful with that. And so I wanted to see how you use this lesson to power your career. Has it informed a go-to-marketing strategy? You're building a company. How have you learned to say, when you're kind of building that go-to-market offering, yeah, we're going to try to serve these customers. We can't serve everyone in the world. We have to say no to these other ones in our marketing and the way we put our value proposition, whatever we're doing.
And again, it's so hard to do because as a company, especially, in an early stage company, you want revenue, you want to say yes to everything. You don't want to let things kind of slip through, but you have to. If you don't stick to what your main focus and main business unit is, you will not do that well and you will fail. So, in terms of Mynter, there's certain pieces of technology that we built that other people are like, oh, can you build this? And we're like, no, because we need to focus our attention here, right? If we had said yes, we wouldn't have done the main thing well. I think that something that is a little underappreciated is that attention units are really our most precious commodity. So we have to spend them very wisely. There's only so many things that you can do and that you can focus on. And by trying to put too many things into that is a recipe for disaster. So you have to kind of treat your time as if it's a currency, which is why I like to refer to it as attention units, and be very mindful of how you use them.
Well, I like attention units, and it's also on the flip side, it's the attention unit of the customer too. So we had the CMO of Satva on earlier, and he told this great story early in his career. He was going to be a copywriter, and he had this ad with all these messages in it. And some great legendary ad man, I forgot his name right now, he had this board with all these nails on it, and he tried to slam another board on it, and nothing really got through. But then he had another board with just one nail, and he slammed the board on it, and it went right through. Right. And when you talk about attention units, so if you're trying to do everything, if you're trying to be that company out there doing everything, you're not really breaking through to the customers, hearing all these different messages about all these things. But if you get known for that right niche, whatever size that niche is, small or big, you know what I mean, that you do that better than everyone else, at least for this ideal customer, that's how you really get through. And that's how you become that company. I mean, because there's probably a few brands in the world like Amazon or, Walmart or whatever they may be, that do just pretty much everything. But very, very few brands, especially startups, especially smaller companies, are going to succeed unless they have that real strong niche that just gets to that attention unit through to the customer's brain.
And listen, Amazon didn't start that way, right? Amazon was very, very focused on being a bookstore until they reached a level of success and could transfer and transition onto bigger things. And when you talk about what we talked about earlier about change, right? The only constant is that there will be change. No one ever thought, probably from our age group, that Sears would ever go out of business. Bezos said Amazon will be out of business one day, right? Like the only constant in anything is that there'll be change. So you have to be open to it.
Yeah, great. So this last lesson, this is a very, very specific lesson. Probably one of the most specific lessons we've ever had in the podcast. I like it. So it's from Sam Klieger, the CEO of KWI. And he taught you 1/3 of your revenue goes to expenses, 1/3 goes to people and payroll, and the other 1/3 goes to profit. So that's very specific. So how do you use this lesson? Like, does it help you make decisions when it comes to hiring or acquiring, or how do you use it?
Yeah. And just to clarify also, for Sam, who will be listening to this, that yes, it depends on the stage of company that you're at, whether you're an early stage or a mature stage, how much you want to grow and things like that. So it's not a hard rule, but it's so important. It was so profound when he said that to me because, so many companies are racing to spend as much money as possible to grow as fast as possible without thinking about profitability. But if you really run a business that 1/3 of your revenue is profit, the lights are always going to stay on, right? Like no one ever went broke or out of business from making a profit. So every day that's in the back of my head when it's, are we going to spend money on this? Do we need to hire? The team wants to bring on more account managers, but when we run the numbers, that doesn't fit into the formula. So we can't do it yet, right? So it's being very disciplined in when we spend money. And again, a contradiction of this at the moment because we raise a little bit of money, we're losing money right now, but that's all by design for the first 12 months, and then we'll be profitable and we'll operate that way. But it was just such a profound thing to hear at a time when everyone was just spending as much money as possible. That you can grow before you scale and not scale to grow, right? So I think that is a really good lesson for people.
I'm glad you mentioned too that there's exceptions, and I think Picasso is the one that said to be a true artist, you need to know the rules before you break them. So I think that's maybe also where the rule's helpful, where yes, you have this business plan, this strategy where you're consciously breaking it now, but you're kind of building to this. So I wonder, where does it come? Where does this rule become the most painful? Is it if you've got a huge client you're about to bring on, or where's it most where you got to make that tough decision? I mean, the things that keep you up at night.
So I think it's as you look at your ideal customer profile and how big or small that customer has to be to fit into your metrics and your formula. But usually it's the most painful on the hiring side. Your team wants to hire people. Yeah. You have X amount of people where you think you should have Y amount of people. And do you keep adding on because you don't want your team to get burnt out and you want to support them? But based on the math, based on the metrics of, revenue per client or, headcount per client or whichever KPIs you're looking at, if that doesn't say higher, but the team says, hey, we'd like this, right? And it's we like this versus we need this are different statements. But I think that's really the most painful is when it comes to adding headcount.
Yeah. Yep. I think a lot of companies are actually learning that now when you see how some of the tech companies are slowing down their own hiring. Some of the huge tech companies.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Scary.
We covered a whole, yeah. Oh, we'll see what the future holds. Future always holds something. Like you said, the only constant is change. So whatever change is going to come. I know everyone's kind of on the edge of their seats now with these kind of two opposing forces that you're involved with. There's one, there's this macro economy. Where's it going? Is there inflation? Is there recession? And then two, there's this next explosive Web 3.0 growth rate. Where are we heading? We go in this direction. We go in that direction. Is it going to slow things down? Are we ultimately getting here? These are the scary things, but ultimately, I think this is the fun of marketing.
No,
right? If it was static,
for sure, it's for sure the fun thing. Listen, I think that in 2 to 3 years from now, every loyalty program and every event ticket is going to be an NFT that's sitting in your native wallet on your Apple Wallet or Google Wallet, right? Like that's where things are headed. How fast we get there is the question mark. But like these are all really fun things to embrace.
And that's the fun thing about being a marketer, right? You get to jump into all these different things. It's not going to be the same wasn't the same for me when my career started. It's not going to be the same when my career ended. So we talked about a whole boatload of different things. We talked about it's okay to say no. We talked about lessons for your revenue. We talked about the ideal customer. We even talked about John Starks, fortunately. But when you had to break it all down, what would you say, Frank, in your opinion, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
So
he turned around, by the way, to look at Stark just to get that final.
I did. I wanted
a final bit of inspiration before we went to the final question.
I did because as I look at Starks, I'm going to come up with 3 as
okay.
As
there you go, number 3, John Starks. Yeah,
of what we're going to do. The first one is always keep the end in mind, right? Whether it's a business, whether it's a campaign, whether it's a meeting, right? Like, what do I want to get out of doing this? So you have very clear expectations and goals. I would say the other is, and this is, a big part of the digital analytics class I taught at NYU, was test, analyze, and optimize. We think we know things, but we don't know if we know things. And just because something worked for one brand doesn't mean it'll work for another. So test, take chances, analyze, optimize, rinse and repeat that often. And that's a good recipe for success. And I would say the most important is put yourself in the shoes of your target consumer. We're all consumers. We know how we want to be treated. We know how we want to be spoken to. We know how we want to be communicated with. Don't lose sight of that when you're on the other side of the table, right? Like take advantage of the fact that you're also a consumer and say like, would I like this? How would I react if this was communicated to me this way? I think it is pretty valuable as well.
Super valuable. It's one of the toughest things to do when we've got something that's pulling us in this other direction, like our paycheck or our sales numbers, to say, what would it be like to be this person? Well, Frank, this was a fun conversation. Great to connect with a fellow UF alum. Thanks for joining us today.
Go Gators. And Daniel, I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Great. And thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketing, SHERPA.com.